G'day, ZiggyD here. Welcome back for some more Path of Exile Awakening beta. In this video, I want to give you guys an early look at the character I'm developing to test Eldritch Battery with Ghost Reaver, and the new ES on hit mechanic as well. So originally when Eldritch Battery came out, we looked at 3 different ways of getting it to run. One was Zealot's Oath, which I tested on my first character. There was Recharge Delay, which I tested with the Totem character. And now with the ES changes, so ES recharges in 3 seconds instead of 6, that seems to be working okay. The final step or set or way of making Eldritch Battery work was Ghost Reaver, and I thought initially that this was a terrible idea. I couldn't really think of too many situations in which Ghost Reaver would be that useful, because trading Life Leech, which is such a powerful defensive mechanic, to be able to support your mana is not worth it. In my opinion, you're always better off building mana. But having looked at it some more, I believe that there exists a pretty strong niche in which you can use Ghost Reaver and the new ES on hit mechanic, and or maybe not even needing to use Ghost Reaver in some cases, with elemental attack builds. So this is elemental wand builds, elemental bow builds, and possibly elemental spectral throw builds, or some elemental melee builds, as long as they hit fast and often is the key. So as a bit of a catch-up for some of you guys who are less familiar with the new Eldritch Battery, Energy Shield is now placed over the top of mana instead of over the top of life, and instead of the previous Eldritch Battery, which converted it to actual mana. So it acts as a secondary mana pool that functions very similarly to ES. The only difference is that monster damage does not affect the ES. Instead, using mana first uses your Energy Shield, and if you are consuming mana, your Energy Shield won't start to recharge. So generally speaking, this is a poor mechanic as far as using mana goes, because most characters use mana fairly constantly and they never really get a chance to actually recharge that ES. So often it doesn't work unless you start building like a lot of cooldown recovery time, or if you start, regenerating with Zealot's Oath. And then in this case, with Ghost Reaver. So with this character, I'm testing an elemental crit bow shadow, and I'm testing this idea of using Ghost Reaver and Energy Shield on hit. Now, you can obtain Energy Shield on hit as one of the affixes on the new jewels. So I have a jewel here that gives 2 Energy Shield gain for each enemy hit by your attacks. This one's also nice because it's got a little bit of life gain on hit as well. So with this, I can use an AoE attack to keep my Energy Shield up, even without Ghost Reaver. So let me go demonstrate this inside of, where I'm currently up to. So we'll go down here into the Dried Lake. Spoilers! But I'm sure if you guys are watching beta content, you're okay with spoilers. So down here in the Dried Lake, I'll show you what I have linked and set up to my my split arrow attack just here. Where is my split arrow? Here we go. We've got split arrow linked to faster attacks, weapon elemental damage, and chain. Now this is a pretty mana hungry setup. Weapon LE and chain, both very huge multipliers, 140 and 175, and then 115 for faster attacks. Also, I'm using, a fairly fast weapon, Death's Harp at the moment. You can obviously get a lot faster, but I don't think that's going to be an issue at all, and you'll see why in just a second here. So this is pretty much purely the ES on hit jewel just here. One ES on hit jewel, as you can see, is more than enough to completely sustain all of my mana requirements for this skill. And I do believe that this is going to scale up plenty fine. Like, the amount of ES I get back is pretty huge, and potentially we can start maybe adding an extra jewel or something if we need to. Essentially, I can straight up double that amount of ES recovery if I need to with just a second jewel, and of course we could add more if we need to. But I think we can probably do this with a pretty low level of investment. So the secondary setup is, the problem with this setup is just relying on this. This is fine if you're just using that AoE, but when you start using a single target, then you have a problem, because ES on hit with a single target doesn't work quite so well. So currently, as you can tell, here I'm using Frenzy, which has a fairly high mana cost as well. Frenzy is a very expensive skill in general, and it only attacks with usually 1 arrow. I have a Death's Harp, which is adding an extra arrow. So you're only getting 2 ES back whenever you hit an enemy with that, which is not quite enough to sustain. So for this single target setup, for this Frenzy setup, I'm using Ghost Reaver, which makes Life Leech applied to Energy Shield instead of Life. And then to support my Frenzy use, I've just simply linked it to Life Leech. Now, the survivability is not a big deal for my single target attack. I obviously can get life gain on hit through my multi-target attack, so I'm going to have plenty of survivability that way. But I'll show you how this is working with Frenzy with just the Life Leech gem here. So you can tell, just on the single target there, it more than offsets the cost. And this one will scale up directly with damage as well, which should work very nicely. So I can Frenzy as much as I want as well, and that will also fully keep my ES. So this works very well, even with a very small ES pool. Now I have a large ES pool compared to what I need. I was doing this with about 50 to 100 ES earlier, and I think at endgame I could do this with a pretty small amount of ES as well. The thing I'm going to have to consider moving forwards is the leech rate cap. So depending on your pool of ES is how much you can actually leech. So I'll need to sort of tinker and find the exact right amount of ES that I can run. I want to run as little as possible because with an ES on hit setup, you don't need a large pool of ES. I could maybe get away with 150 ES, almost no ES, just enough to use my skill once or twice and I'd have more than enough. It kind of works a bit like mana in that regard. The Frenzy setup, though, is a little bit different because of that life leech. I maybe need a bit of a bigger energy shield pool. So I'll have to tinker with that at endgame, and I do have a 6-link lined up, so I'll be able to try this in a 6-link setup as well, both for my single and my multi-target, and I'll be able to test this moving forwards. But this is showing some potential. It's working so well now for the leveling process that I'm very keen to see how it scales up into endgame, so I'll be testing this over the next few days on stream. So my theory is this: based on what I've seen so far, I think it might be possible for my character to run almost purely evasion gear, maybe one evasion ES piece, or just running like an energy shield ring, or, you know, getting a little bit of energy shield on a belt. I mean, I've got 32 energy shield on here. The Shadow himself gets a little bit of energy shield on the tree, and that there is like 50 energy shield. So I might just need like one energy shield piece or one energy shield ring, and that should be all I need. So this is important because the big question here is, you know, is it worth trading a bunch of evasion to be able to run Eldritch Battery? And the answer would be no. Like, evasion is a very important survivability stat here. Reflect in the beta is not as much of an issue because they've changed the way Reflect works. It's now a single mob, so that's not as big of an issue. But you still want a fair bit of evasion for survivability, right? We're going to be running Acrobatics and Ondar's Guile. Acrobatics will half our ES, so I maybe need to get 100 ES to end up with 50 that I'll probably need to keep my skills going, or to keep my multi-target going. Maybe if I need a little bit more, maybe I'll have to wear one good energy shield piece, so I can wear one evasion energy shield piece of armor, or one pure ES piece. We'll see how that works out. Maybe I could just do that on gloves or boots or something like that. So there's some potential there for that to be fairly min-maxed without investing too much in terms of gear to be able to get the ES pool to make this work. Now, what's the advantage of this, right? Because this is a pretty standard character for what people currently play on live. Typically, people run these auras plus one more anger, and they use the Alpha's Howl, which is what I'm going to do on this character. And typically, to make this work, mana cost-wise, most people use Blood Magic. They use Blood Magic on their single target, they use Blood Magic on their AoE. Now, for my single target, I'm using Life Leech, so I've essentially just switched to Blood Magic Gem for a Life Leech Gem, so nothing's really changed there in terms of the single target. But the potential benefit is, and it won't sound very big, the potential benefit is that I don't need to use a Blood Magic Gem on my AoE, so I can rock, 5-link full of damage, and then life gain on hit for survivability, or I can trade that out, maybe potentially even just for survivability as well, because I'll be able to get a fair bit of life gain on hit on, jewels and things like that. You can get life gain on hit and ES gain on hit jewels total together, so this is a low roll on the life gain on hit here, but I could get higher, and you can get a little bit of stuff like that on gear as well. So I may or may not even have to use the life gain on hit. So potentially this character could use a 6-link full damage supports. So that could be fairly attractive. So the trade-off is basically 2 nodes here to get Ghost Reaver, and then I'm trading those 2 nodes, I believe, just for the ability to not use Blood Magic, to instead use a damage support. So it seems like a pretty minor point, but it's an interesting sort of experiment to test, and I'm looking forward to taking this further in the game and to testing this at endgame and seeing how worth it this is. But it seems like pretty low investment. And I should say, also the energy shield node. So, a couple passives for Ghost Reaver and a couple passives for Eldritch Battery as well. So you're trading off a couple passives for Blood Magic, not have to use that. Now, an extra support could be very strong. There's, for example, the new Innovate gem that you can use, which would be a huge clear speed boost. So I might potentially be able to use that instead. So there's a few options I have available to me that I'm very keen to test out. So I'll report in once I get this character endgame, running on its 6-link and everything, and seeing how it goes and whether it ended up being worth it. But at least mechanically, I've got a proof of concept here that you can actually make this function. So yeah, the question of whether this min-maxes out and is worth it in the end, I'll have to test that over the next couple days. And as I said, I will report in. But for now, proof of concept. Hopefully you guys find it interesting. I think the mechanics of how this works are pretty interesting. And let's see if I can make a pretty efficient character with this setup, and whether it's a nice alternative way of playing instead of using Blood Magic. And then maybe this concept could be applied to other builds as well, maybe even more min-maxed than this kind of idea. So anyway, that's it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.